the dominant metaphor of the human mind being a computer is it essentially leaves very little room for emotional things and even for bodily things, right? It's like the central processing unit is just the neurons in your brain. And I think that led to an impediment in the way that we understand and study emotion and bodily states. And I think that one of the things that we had to get past as a field was that thought that it's not that anybody thought that emotions didn't exist or they didn't influence judgment, but it was treated as okay, here is you, Jamie, your mind. And sometimes there's other shit that influences it, like an emotion. It's sort of like an annoyance, something that is making your mind work differently than it ought to work. It's not that emotions were held as in any way as important or as equivalent to cognitions, but rather they were just a nuisance variable to be dealt with when trying to understand the human mind. So you have years and years of research on things like memory and perception, even moral judgment, that ignored the influence of emotion, or to the extent that they dealt with it as again, a nuisance variable. There is a tradition that emerged out of all of that people have referred to as embodiment, that emotion researchers have really embraced. And that is to take seriously the idea that the human mind is not just what's between our skull, but rather it is the complex interplay of all of our bodily systems. And the strongest view here in the embodiment camp, like the people who came up with this idea, is that the concepts that we have would not exist if we were in different bodies. So they believe that there's something that is so fundamental to having the kinds of bodies that we have that it gave rise to ideas that seem central and even purely cognitive. So a lot of this work has been on metaphors, right? So when something is high or low in the abstract sense, we're making an appeal to our own physical experiences being high or low, forward or behind, to be forward looking. Our metaphors for time are often just metaphors that we take from location, physical location. So there is, I think, a really interesting strand of ideas that were developed starting probably late 80s, early 90s, and have worked their way into psychology that lead us to hopefully away from thinking of just brains in a vat kind of psychology, but to take seriously that our bodies are playing an important role.
Yeah, that seems to be, there's this very kind of analytical, computery way of thinking that omits this whole, you already have this software, I guess a hardware, and then the software to interface with it in your body that it's telling you all these things all the time about the world.
That's right. And I think there's good reasons for why people want this to be the case. And I think it's, if you look at what your iPhone does versus your desktop computer does, they both might run Microsoft Word, right? So you have Microsoft Word running on your iPhone, you have Microsoft Word running on your PC. Those are very different physical systems. Those are, one of them is an Intel chip, another one is an ARM chip. Like, doesn't matter, but they are different physical systems. But the same program is instantiated at this abstract level, right? So it doesn't matter that one of them is this kind of chip and the other one is this kind of chip. They both functionally are doing the same thing. So this functional level, this philosophical view called functionalism, it holds that, we just happen to be computers that are meat-based. But there is nothing that would stop a silicone computer from having the same kinds of mental processes that we had. And in fact, if you had a really, really sophisticated silicone computer that we programmed right, it would essentially be doing the same thing that a human being is doing. It could have the same kinds of thoughts and the same kind of conscious experience that human beings are doing. So it's a desire to believe that all of the interesting stuff is at this abstract layer of symbol manipulation. It doesn't matter if it's an ARM chip or an Intel chip or a Motorola chip or a brain with neurons or whatever other thing we haven't discovered yet. A machine that can do calculations ought to be capable of the same thing as a human mind. And I think that the desire to believe that sort of functionalist account of what the mind is, led people to ignore the particular kind of bodies and brains that we have. And I maybe it was misguided, but it was misguided because of a real belief that we want to make progress in understanding how the mind works, and it would be good if minds could be minds independent of the particular medium in which we are seeing them. Like a Martian could have just green goo in their brain, but still be capable of thinking things. I think that was a lot of the motivation for this computational metaphor.